This virtual town hall meeting is presented by Indiana Town Halls and WFYI Productions, with support from these partners.
Good evening. I'm David Barris. Welcome to a town hall meeting featuring the GOP candidates for Congress in Indiana's 5th District. The town hall for Democratic primary candidates will be webcast tomorrow at 7 p.m. A town hall for primary winners will be held in October. The event is being staged by a new nonprofit organization known as Indiana Town Halls. It was founded by an activist named Les Zwern and inspired by bipartisan town halls conducted by GOP State Senator John Ruckelhaus and Democratic State Representative Ed Delaney. Our website is indianatownhalls.org. Indiana Town Hall's partners include WFYI Productions, the Indiana Citizen, the Mike Downs Center at Purdue Fort Wayne, Indiana Campus Compact, and Informing to Empower Democracy. Because of the size of the Republican field, we're holding the meetings in 2 sessions, this one and a subsequent town hall that will follow at 8 o'clock tonight. The candidates in this first group include Kent Abernathy, Andrew Bales, Micah Beckwith, Carl Brizzi, Alan Davidson, Chuck Dietzen, and Beth Henderson. For fairness, we'll be going in alphabetical order. A quick note about timing. Candidates are asked to limit opening statements to 30 seconds and may take up to a minute to respond to questions. They will then be given a minute for closing statements at the end of the town hall, which will last about 70 minutes. But let's begin now, first with the opening statements and Kent Abernathy. Kent?
Well, Dave, thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the citizens of the 5th District of Indiana. Duty, honor, country. Those words from the West Point motto are really one of the first things you learn as a new cadet, and they've been my guiding light throughout my life. My name's Ken Abernathy. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an Iraq War veteran, I'm a retired Army colonel, businessman, and a native Hoosier. And I'm running for Congress because I believe we need leaders in Washington who put the country first and focus on providing solutions and are ready to make the tough decisions to reclaim the life we all knew. Thank you.
Ken, thank you. Andrew Bales is next. Andrew?
Hi, my name is Andrew Bales. I decided to run for Congress back in November on Veterans Day. I'm a veteran, 13 years. I'm also a 15-year veteran of teaching. I decided to run because I know that our country is in crisis. We have major problems going on with spending. Our spending is out of control. Our immigration, people are flowing across our borders and making America unsafe. And we witnessed for the first time an unprecedented coup against a sitting president, and now we have COVID-19. I believe that it's time for Congress to do something about it. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you. Micah Beckwith. Micah?
Good evening. I'm Micah Beckwith. I'm a pastor, I'm a small business owner, and I have a family in Noblesville, and I'm a lover of the Constitution. One of the reasons I got into this race is because I see our constitutional values being stripped away, and I see the next generation not understanding what the greatness of this history and the foundations of this history are. And so for me, I look at it as not just enough to win the next election. We have to win the next generation. If we do not take these conservative principles that we know are the best principles to lead our country forward and get them to the hearts and the minds of the next generation, then 30 years from now, we will see a socialist America. We will see the values of our founders ripped away from the fabric of our nation. And that's why I'm running. Thank you for having me tonight.
Micah, thank you. Carl Brizzi is next. Carl?
Thanks, David. Good evening. My name is Carl Brizzi. I'm running for Congress because our country is in peril. We are fighting an invisible war, folks. China lied about the virus, causing thousands of deaths and costing this country trillions. of dollars. I'm a battle-tested prosecutor. This isn't a vanity project for me, and I certainly do not need a job. I am running for Congress because I am the right person for this moment in history. I'm the only person running who's investigated the communist Chinese government, hunting down illegalities as corrupt Chinese officials colluded with corrupt Democratic officials in the Clinton-Gore White House and the Democratic National Committee to influence policy and to influence elections. When I'm elected, I will stand with President Trump and hold China accountable.
Carl, thank you. Alan Davidson. Alan?
I worked as an engineer at IDEM for more than 14 years. I have a unique experience solving problems, streamlining processes, and improving efficiency in state government. My work currently saves NDOT tens of millions of dollars in reduced long-term maintenance expenses. And my previous work at IDEM helped businesses wait less time for air pollution permits and begin their construction projects sooner. I'm proud of my work for Indiana, but I believe my skills are more needed in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Central Texas, specifically the city of Killeen, next to the Fort Hood Army base. I went to college at Texas Tech University, where I received a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering in 1991, then moved to Northeast Indianapolis shortly afterward. I lived in Northeast Indianapolis from 1992 to 2007, and Fishers from 2007 to 2015, and lived once again in Northeast Indianapolis. Thank you.
Ellen, could you give us just the first part about your employment again? We missed that. The audio was not really good.
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer working at NDOT for 13 years. Before that, I worked as an engineer at IDEM for more than 14 years.
Excellent. That was the part we missed. We appreciate it. Thanks, Alan. Chuck Dietzen, your turn.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chuck Dietzen. I'm a pediatric rehab specialist. I originally went to Purdue and became a distinguished alum of the School of Agriculture to be a veterinarian. An interesting thing happened. My family took care of 150 foster children, so I began working with children. I've been taking care of everyone else's children for 52 years of my life. Pediatric rehab was a good fit for me, and I became chief pediatric rehab at Riley Hospital. And in doing that, I've traveled the world, helping in other countries and inviting those people to learn how to here. And I believe in empowerment, not entitlement.
Chuck, thank you. Beth Henderson. Beth?
Good evening. I'm Beth Henderson. I've lived and worked in the 5th District for 30 years. I've heard time and time again that my expertise in nursing and healthcare, agriculture, and business, along with my Hoosier values and conservative principles, are exactly what's needed in Congress now more so than ever. I'm a lifelong conservative Republican. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and I'm for limited government, and I'm a member of the world's most trusted profession, nursing. I'm Beth Henderson, and I ask for your vote for Indiana's 5th District.
Beth, thank you. And now we will move into the questions which come directly from residents in the 5th Congressional District. And we'll begin with one that is at top of mind right now. How do you rate the federal government response to the coronavirus? We'll begin with Kent Abernathy. Kent?
Thanks, Dave. I think that President Trump and Vice President Pence and the team they've assembled have done a tremendous job working us through this crisis safely, and are now getting us ready to open the country back up. Governor Holcomb, I would add, has also done a great job also in navigating the state through this challenging time. So, during my 2 tours in the Pentagon, I was involved with coordination of military support for both Hurricanes Rita and Katrina in 2005, and later the swine flu pandemic in 2009. So I've had firsthand experience with this type of crisis. And in reality, dealing with crisis situations such as this is a lot like war in the fact that everything becomes exponentially harder. So we need to treat this the same way we would a foreign threat. The Democrats seem to be more focused on attacking President Trump than on helping us pull the country through this. So I'm running for Congress because I think we need leaders in Washington who put the country first and focus on the tough decisions, who understand the issues and know how to react under pressure.
Kent Abernathy, thank you. Same question, Andrew Bales. Andrew, how do you rate the federal government response to the coronavirus?
Considering this is an unprecedented pandemic, I'd say that the federal government has done an outstanding job. One thing in particular that I find interesting, are we okay?
Yes, yeah, you're fine, Andrew. We can hear you.
Okay. So one thing I find interesting is I've never seen before is that President Trump under the federal government has delegated to the state governors. Never before in my history have I seen that action. I think it's unprecedented, and I think it's doing a great job. Depending on which governor you're talking about, I think our Governor Holcomb, has shown restraint through this whole thing versus, say, the governor from Michigan. So all in all, I think we're doing a fair job considering the information that we're getting.
All right, thank you, Andrew. And now we go to Micah Beckwith. Micah?
Yeah, I think President Trump has done a decent job. What I like about his approach is he's given, like Andrew said, he's given the states the authority to make the decisions. My biggest concern over any of this is that our constitutional rights don't get trampled. The government very quickly in some states began to say we can or cannot do things. We can label people non-essential. In my opinion, nobody can be labeled non-essential. I don't care what you do for a living. Everything you do, every part of the economy is interconnected. The moment you label somebody non-essential, you have just trampled their rights. And so states like South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem has done a tremendous job, in my opinion. Other states like Governor Whitmer in Michigan, she's basically a communist. And so she has trampled the rights of so many Michiganders, and you see it playing out. And so for me, I look at it from the federal response is throwing the information, making sure the states have what they need and the resources they need. And I think the president has done a tremendous job doing that. The states, on the other hand, some of them have been great. Some of them have not been good at all.
All right. Micah Beckwith. Thanks, Micah. Carl Brizzi, same question for you.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm going to echo some of the sentiments that have already been expressed about Governor Whitmer in Michigan, our neighbor state. Every time I see her on television, she scares me to death. She's looking for more and more reasons to be tyrannical. This woman has never had more power than she has right now. Now, as far as President Trump and Pence and the rest of the administration, look, they're the subject of Chinese propaganda. They are doing everything that they can possibly do to combat this virus. But from the minute that this story was exposed, the Chinese propaganda machine went into full action, labeling this Trump-endemic with misinformation and disinformation and in a coordinated campaign to not accept responsibility for what the Chinese government did, David. And I'm not talking about whether or not this was intentionally manufactured in a lab or if it was inadvertently released. I'm talking about what they did in the cover-up, right? In the prosecution world, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. That's the most important. And the Chinese government is responsible for the spread of this pandemic.
Carl Brizzi, thank you. Alan Davidson, your turn.
The White House is handling the pandemic as well as can be expected, given that the last pandemic of this magnitude happened a century ago, and the appropriate remedies often run counter to President Trump's usual diplomatic and economic policies. Despite that, President Trump is doing the right things. The CARES Act allocated over $2 trillion for the purposes of addressing the immediate medical and economic impacts of COVID-19, but it also included a lot of wasteful spending unrelated to the pandemic in order to get it approved quickly. What I will do, if elected to the next Congress, is identify the wasteful items, and if the funding wasn't temporary, to make it temporary by cutting the funding to those items.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson, same question. How do you rate the federal government response to the coronavirus?
Actually, I think it's my turn.
Chuck, we need to go back to you. Go ahead.
Okay. I think the administration has done a great job, and I often say it concerns me when we are being reactive rather than proactive. In a case like this, we didn't have much choice. Here, this comes around once every 100 years. But I've been very pleased with what the administration is. When I speak about the federal government in general, I haven't been so pleased with how Congress has trying to slip in some pieces of the Green New Deal and slow things that way. Interestingly enough, the South China Morning Post and the Guardian have said that some of the Chinese people are pushing against the government, but they're being suppressed. Once again, I'm pleased that we live in a country where the federal government allows you to protest against how they're handling it. But I do believe that should be handled by the governors of the state, which is what has happened.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Now, Beth Henderson, same question.
Well, coming from the healthcare standpoint as a nurse and a small business owner, I see both sides. And I feel that the Trump administration and our governor, I think they're doing a really good job given the task at hand. It has been a very interesting road, but I think they're taking the steps that they need to be taken. And I think people are very anxious to get the economy open and running. So I think they're doing that in a very responsible fashion, and it will be measured as far as the effects. But the sooner we can get the economy up and running again, and I think we can trust Trump to do that. He got our economy in really good shape right before, which is great. So I think he can do that in a very measurable fashion and very quickly. So I think that he's doing a good job, and so is our governor.
Beth Henderson, thank you. We have a question now from a voter here in Indianapolis. And the question is, how are you qualified to handle this current national emergency? And let's start with Kent. Kent?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, I think, again, these type things, as I said earlier, it's similar to war. And you have to treat it like that, and everything becomes exponentially harder. I also have personal experience in managing these crises during my 2 tours in the Pentagon when I did was involved in the military support for Katrina and Rita, and then also for the swine flu later on. I'd also add that when I was here at the state, I was involved along with the current Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, and during Governor Pence when we had the avian flu epidemic here. So I think those kind of things, being able to work and react under pressure, makes kind of separates me from the others. I would also add one of the things on these things are executed. You need to understand the process on how it works. They're executed locally. They're managed by the state. That's the way the system is designed. The National Emergency Response System is designed, and the federal government provides support. So the federal government's been asked to do a lot more in direct interaction than what the actual protocol normally is.
Kent Abernathy, thank you. Andrew Bales, the question from a voter here in Indianapolis: how are you qualified to handle the current national emergency?
Thank you, Dave. Just a couple of words. 15 years of teaching middle school. In teaching that, every day there's a new crisis of some matter or another. Excuse me. And learning to deal with crises as they come up is what makes a capable and strong leader. I believe I did that for 15 years as a teacher, for 13 years in the military as a platoon leader, and also an executive officer for a maintenance company. There are always situations, there are always problems hopefully not always pandemics, but it takes someone with a broad knowledge of how to fix these situations.
Andrew, thank you. Micah Beckwith, same question.
So I'm a business leader, a ministry leader in the area, and I think the leadership is key in this crisis right now. From a federal level, Congress's job is to provide support and leadership in a way that honors the Constitution. So what we're seeing right now, I have a broad background in constitutional history, and I think what Congress has done is it's pushed out funds to the states, which is a good thing right now. But the way they're doing it, I think I would be tackling it from that perspective as a congressman. I'm saying, listen, this pork barrel spending, throwing stuff like the Green New Deal spending into this bill is absolutely unacceptable. We have got to get money into the hands of the small business owners. And I have an economics background. I understand that right now we have a pandemic crisis, but we will have an economic crisis if we do not hurry up and get this ball rolling again. And so I think in this current situation, I would be qualified because I can see both sides, but I understand that these sweeping effects that we're doing right now from a congressional standpoint might have generational impact if we're not careful.
Micah, thank you. Carl Brizzi, question for you, same one.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to probably break the cardinal rule of debates and say something nice about one of the folks running against me, Ken Abernathy. He's a war veteran. He's a good man. He's a smart man. He's a warrior. He knows exactly what we are up against. We are at war. Kent is right. And we are at war against an invisible enemy, and that enemy is the virus. What makes Carl Brizzi different than everyone else running is that I'm a battle-tested prosecutor, and I've investigated the corrupt Chinese government. 20 years ago, when I investigated the Clinton-Gore re-election Democrat National Committee, I investigated exactly the same thing the Chinese government is doing right now in terms of the cover-up and deception with this virus. Make no mistake, China is responsible, and they need to be held accountable. This virus has cost us trillions. There are things we can do. We can't rely on the United Nations. We can't rely on the World Health Organization, but we can make China pay. We can stop buying Chinese goods. We can stop importing Chinese goods. We can seize Chinese property. We can impose sanctions on China. There are things we can do. And when I'm in Congress, I will stand with President Trump and get those things done. We will hold China accountable.
Carl Brizzi, thank you. Alan Davidson, this question again from a voter in Indianapolis. How are you qualified to handle the current national emergency?
With a degree in industrial engineering, part of the skills that I've learned in college are to streamline processes and eliminate waste. And the CARES Act, in an effort to get it through as expeditiously as possible, contains a lot of waste, a lot of inefficiencies. It was my opinion that it should not have included anything that wasn't temporary, and it should not have included anything that was not specifically related to combating the coronavirus or maintaining our economy. Those are the three standards that I will use if elected in order to determine whether or not something added to the CARES Act was legitimate or not. And if it was not, and it's not temporary spending, meaning we can't get rid of it quickly enough just by voting it out, we need to vote it out.
Alan, thank you.
My industrial engineering degree is my key to being the most qualified.
Alan Davidson, thank you. Chuck Dietzen, same question.
Well, like Alan, I have a background in Lean Six Sigma and process management, how to streamline. One of my great concerns as a doctor was the lack of time we had with patients. So I've been known as a bit of a disruptor in healthcare for 30 years now. I've been taking care of patients at the side as well as a lot of medical legal work, understanding the importance of how you do disease control, infection control. One of the things that I had created one of the businesses, Alice Healthcare. We created telehealth. We did the proof of concept 15 years ago, and actually created a face-to-face smartphone app for consultants, and that allowed people not to be in waiting room coughing and sneezing on each other. I've also said throughout my 20-some years of working in other countries, 20 years in 21 other countries, 15 countries who've come here to meet with me, I always said if we got the politicians out of the way, we'd probably get along fine. Now I feel like I need to go there to make sure that we do get along better and have less of a tendency to adversarial relations.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson, the question from a voter in Indianapolis. How are you qualified to handle the current national emergency, Beth?
Well, that's a great question, and it's right up my alley. As a nurse case manager, I've seen from my experience what needs to be done to make our healthcare system manageable and cost effective. And as a nurse and business person, I can and will tackle this COVID crisis, this challenge, and deliver the results we need and deserve. It's also affecting our economy. We really need to eliminate wasteful spending, and it's so important right now to get back on track. We need to reignite the waste report originated by Dr. Tom Coburn, who is a family friend, a great medical expert, congressman and senator. I plan to continue his legacy in cutting wasteful spending of our taxpayers' dollars. One way I would approach this would be by moving some of the federal departments out of DC, such as moving the USDA and the Department of the Interior, and moving them to the Midwest, closer to the constituents. And that's another subject. But also, we need to eliminate our dependence on China. 95% of our medications are being manufactured in China, along with so many other goods and services. We need to quit depending on a country that takes advantage of us and does not have our best interest at heart. We need to pass fair trade deals and protect our farmers and manufacturers and stand strong on our own and get back to made in the USA.
Beth Henderson, thank you. One final question, staying on the issue of COVID, and then we'll move on. But this comes to us from the Indiana Public Broadcasting two-way, and it's an interesting question with COVID going on now. Do you believe that all people should have access to health care? Let's start with Kent Abernathy. Kent?
Well, thanks for the question. It's a good question. First of all, I think that the current healthcare system, by any stretch of the, excuse me, Dave, yeah. Dave, was a problem?
No, not at all, Kent. Keep going.
I saw you waving at me.
No, sorry about that. No.
Okay, I'm sorry. I saw you waving at me. I thought there was.
No, didn't mean to throw you off.
Waving at me. I thought I was doing. You want me to stop?
No, keep going.
Okay. So first, Democrats' healthcare policies, specifically Obamacare, is crushed the country and taken away the right of us to choose our doctors, right? And as I've traveled the district, I've talked to farmers who tell me that they're paying $1,900 or more for high deductible basic health care plans for their families. And I talk to small business owners, and they tell me they'd love to provide group health insurance for their employees and themselves, but because of the cost and the regulatory requirements, they simply can't afford to provide insurance and stay in business. So I think we need to reform healthcare nationwide and replace Obamacare with common sense, patient-focused, market-driven type solutions that drive down the cost and also that allow people to make their own healthcare choices. So, and we do that through ensuring price transparency. We need to allow insurers to tailor plans to individuals and end surprise billing. And we also need to address the the retail prescription drugs. So socialized medicine is not the answer. I can tell you that. And I'm running for Congress because I think we need to make these tough decisions that politicians have been dodging for 2 decades or more. And when I was a banker, this was a topic of discussion with business people. It's still a topic of discussion today.
All right. Kent Abernathy, thank you. Andrew Bales, same question. Do you believe that all people should have access to health care?
Should all people have access to health care? Sure, I think they should. Whether the government provides that for them, that's a completely different story. You know, our Constitution says that the government will promote the general welfare. It won't guarantee it. There are many market-driven solutions that we can do to fix health care. The government running universal health care is not one of them. Kent Abernathy mentioned price transparency and competition. Absolutely. Making it easier for employers, for small businesses with small groups of people to get in there and get a decent policy. I believe that the group risk pools are also another way of looking at that, and having groups that are in similar businesses be able to pool their people into a risk group. So that all those will lower the cost of healthcare.
Andrew, thank you. Micah Beckwith, your turn.
Yeah, I think everyone should have access to it, but it's not the government's job to provide that access. The government can barely run the post office well. I'm not going to give it authority to run our most complex healthcare system in the world. You know, Ronald Reagan said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm with the government and I'm here to help." Right now, it is not the government's job to get in and fix the healthcare crisis because they can't. It is the free market's job. It's always been the free market's job. Open up the borders. Let us go across state lines to buy insurance. Create price transparency. You know, President Trump signed the price transparency executive order. Guess who had a problem with that? It was the big healthcare networks. They didn't want you to know what you were paying because they're making money by keeping it hidden. So if we can let the free market open up and do what it was designed to do and get the government's hand off of the free market scales, our healthcare system will just soar, and people, it will be patient-centered, it will be affordable, and it will be accessible. But it's going to have to come from the ingenuity of the free market and the American people, not the government.
Micah Beckwith, thank you. Carl Brizzi, do you believe all people should have access to health care?
Well, of course. I mean, the short answer is of course. Human beings should have access to health care. So I'm not exactly sure if the implication of the question is, should the government then take over healthcare? Should all people have access to healthcare? 100%, absolutely. But a single payer system is not the answer. The government is not the answer, as others have stated. Look, we need to get a handle on these costs. We lost our healthcare last year, my family and I. We lost our healthcare for a period of about 8 months. We have 6 children. It was an incredibly scary time in the Brizzi household. You know what I did, Dave? When I would used to go get a prescription, it would fill and it would be one price. Then when I was paying for it out of pocket, it was like 3 times less than what the pharmacy was paying with the insurance. And I started to ask questions of my doctor. What's going on? Why is the drug 3 times more expensive if the insurance company is paying for it than if I'm paying for it out of pocket? That's a problem. I started doing some research. The Journal of American Medical Association, June 12th to June 2019, found that there's almost $1 trillion of fraud, abuse, and waste in the healthcare system. 25%. That's where we need to start.
Carl Brizzi, thank you. And I think the question implies the fact that even though everyone has access now, essentially, to the healthcare system, not everybody has the money or the means to actually access the healthcare system. And so let's go now to continue, and we'll go to Alan Davidson. Alan?
Thank you. I do believe everybody should have access to health care, but like our education system, where we have a public education system and then we have private schools, the healthcare system is not a one-size-fits-all system either. I support replacing Obamacare with a free market-based healthcare system, where healthcare providers are required to publish full details about their fee schedules, where an independent entity maintains information about quality of service and patient satisfaction. Patients can then choose how to balance quality and affordability on their own, allowing competition to increase options and drive down costs. I also believe we need to provide incentives for more American students to become doctors and nurses to address shortages of qualified people in the medical field. And we also need legislation that will protect seniors by requiring price controls or rebates for drug price increases exceeding the rate of inflation, by lowering the annual out-of-pocket caps for Medicare Part D patients, and by allowing the reimportation of drugs that are found to be cheaper outside of the U.S.
Alan Davidson, thank you. Chuck Dietzen, same question for you.
Well, I clearly think everyone should have access to healthcare, which is why I founded Timmy Global Health in 1997. We train up our young people to help us fill that void, and basically we are creating community leaders for this country by serving the underserved here and abroad. I've never understood why we haven't casted a better IT net, both in the rural areas and to do telehealth. Also, I believe, of course, healthcare insurance should be sold across state lines. It should also have more associations in health plans, as we did with Farm Bureau here in Indiana. But ultimately, there's lots of money in healthcare. We've got to spend it wisely. We need more training in medical and nursing school, nutrition, as well as fitness and end-of-life care. Ultimately, what I've seen in other countries where they do have socialized medicine, where I've helped out, they don't have the resources to properly care for patients, and therefore they get in different. Not in favor of social medicine. We can't be dependent on the safety net.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson, do you believe all people should have access to health care? You see it from the inside.
Yes, absolutely. As a nurse, I feel we all deserve affordable and accessible health care that's available on the free market. I am not for Medicare for all. As a registered nurse and starting and running a successful business in medical case management, I've seen firsthand how our healthcare system works. And my expertise in working with medical providers, insurance companies, employers, and patients is the very background that is so needed to address our healthcare challenges. In our small business, we've recently seen our cost of healthcare skyrocket, just as Carl was talking about, with increases going over 30%. I have the very training and experience needed for delivering a cost-effective and efficient healthcare solutions that are manageable and affordable, unlike Obamacare. As a nurse, I know how to listen. I'm a solution maker. I practice collaboration and conflict resolution. My expertise is exactly what's needed in Washington, D.C. to bring solutions to fix our healthcare system.
Beth Henderson, thank you. This comes to us now from a voter in Carmel. What is your priority, loyalty to party and president or to the Constitution? Kent Abernathy.
So as a young military officer, after graduating from West Point, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And as a member of Congress, my first order of business will be to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to represent the people of the 5th District of Indiana. And so those are my priorities, quite simply stated. And I feel that I'm bound to follow those duties. I'm a team player, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm a lifelong Republican because I believe in the Republican principles. And I think that what the Republican Party stands for are the right solutions to America's problems. But again, it's to support and defend the Constitution. It's to represent the citizens, all citizens of the 5th District of Indiana. Thanks.
Ken, thank you. Andrew Bales, what's your response?
Just like Kent Abernathy, I also took the oath to support and defend our Constitution. twice actually, once as an enlisted soldier and once as an officer. And I'll do that again in Washington when you send me to Washington. I don't always go in lockstep with party. I believe that the Constitution takes precedence over party or any leadership. I'll give you an example. I do like what President Trump is doing, but I think that he's spending too much money. Again, putting us more and further in debt and running deficits. There are some things that I disagree with the Trump administration as well. So I would represent the constituents of the 5th District here in Indianapolis.
Do you think as a freshman, Andrew, as a freshman congressman, you can actually stand up to the party if you don't think they're going in the right direction?
Well, on most things, I do agree. However, I may be that one voice that goes against party lines when everyone is saying do this. I don't like being whipped.
Thank you, Andrew. Micah Beckwith, your turn.
Yeah, that's an easy question. The Constitution, wholeheartedly. I loved when I first heard Mike Pence say he was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. When I heard that the first time out of Mike Pence's mouth, I said, that is exactly what I'm looking for. That's the kind of guy we need. And that's who I am, a Christian, conservative, and a Republican in that order. I actually said in 2018 publicly that the Republican Party deserved to lose the House of Representatives, the majority, because we sent them in 2010 to control spending, to get our deficit and debt under control, to repeal and replace Obamacare, and they didn't do it. In 2010, the debt was at $10 trillion. Over 8 years, it doubled. It more than doubled. It was 23 trillion. It was about 21 trillion when they lost the House in 18. And I spoke out vehemently against the Republican Party at that time. So I will absolutely call the Republican Party out if the Republican Party steps out of line. I like being that curveball. I'm a big fan of Thomas Massey. He really does not hold back punches from the party leadership if he feels they're out of line with the Constitution. I look forward to being that type of leader and that type of voice, and we'll make sure that the Republican Party gets back to faith and family values and honoring the Constitution first and foremost.
Micah, thank you. Carl Brizzi, and again, I'll tell you the question, a voter in Carmel Senate. What is your priority, loyalty to party and president or to the Constitution? Carl?
Well, let me just say amen to my friend Micah Beckwith, because when I decided to jump into this race, David, I did it because our liberties are under attack. The freedoms intended for us by our founding fathers are under attack by these hard left elite progressive politicians who believe they have a monopoly on truth. Whether it's the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, they want to control what you think, they want to control what you say. And I decided at the very last minute to jump into this race because the danger is now. And this was before China and coronavirus, which has completely stolen the spotlight of what is literally going on in Washington. Here's what I'm afraid of. And this is why this question is so important, and I'm so glad that a lot of folks are going to be saying the same thing. What's going on now? Contact tracing. Where were you? Where have you been? You might have been in a grocery store with somebody who had coronavirus, and now we know, and now maybe you need to be sequestered into your house. I was listening to Fox News today talking about travel passports with stamps and RFID chips. What is going on, right? I mean, this virus could eviscerate the Constitution. And so the things that I was concerned about in terms of thought police and censorship and self-censorship, has now rocketed into this whole other area where everything that we do and say is going to be surveilled every day under the guise of safety. And let me tell you this, if I am in DC, I will be the squeakiest wheel there. I will not be intimidated regardless of party, right? They may take me out. I may be one term, whatever. That's fine. But I'm not going to let that go unattacked.
Carl Brizzi, thank you. Alan Davidson, same question.
Well, I see the Constitution as the highest law in the land. And of course, as our next representative, I will take an oath in order to defend the Constitution against all invaders, against all threats, foreign and domestic. I see it as being much more valuable than party loyalty. Those that know me know I used to be a Democrat. I left them because I saw them as a dysfunctional party that was more concerned about the party itself rather than actually running government in a efficient manner. I'm glad to be a Republican, even though I've only been a Republican for about 4 years now. But if I ever came to a situation where I saw the Republican Party is not aligned with the Constitution, I would leave it and become an independent. So the answer definitely is I view the Constitution as more valuable than party loyalty.
Alan, thank you. Chuck Dietzen, your turn.
Well, I'll just remind everyone that the oath is to the Constitution, not to any individuals, not to a particular district. We must uphold the Constitution. On occasion, the Democrats find that it's beneficial to claim that's what they are doing. Frankly, Republican Party has had a much better history of that. I don't expect to agree with everything that the party wants or the administration thinks is the right thing to do. I have written a lot of healthcare policy. I've written a lot of the standards, or national standards, and are now global standards for taking care of individuals with disabilities. And frankly, I've been in many countries where my friends have stood up the tyranny, and frankly, they have been imprisoned and tortured. And so when people ask me, will I be willing to step up, I say, look, with my background, in honor of my friends and in memory of some of them, I must speak to the truth and I must uphold the Constitution, even though that might ruffle some feathers.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson, your turn.
Growing up, I was always taught to respect and support the Constitution. And I stand strong supporting the Constitution. I want to tell a little story. When Terry and I got married 30 years ago, at our wedding reception, my dad made a toast. And at the end of the toast, he said, "Cheers to the next generation." And that has stuck with me over the years, for many, many years. And now it's becoming so much more profound because we really have to protect our freedoms and liberties for our next generation. Hoosiers will come first, always. I'm a conservative Republican. My constituents will be the priority when I make decisions. And career politicians in Washington, insiders, place politics above people and the party before principle. But I'm a political outsider. I'm not beholden to special interest groups who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to me, or send hundreds of thousands of dollars to me, and I will be loyal to our Hoosier families.
Beth Henderson, thank you. Let's talk about climate change and how you plan, or if you plan, to address climate change. Ken Abernathy.
Well, it's a good question. And to be frank, our climate is since the beginning has been changing since the Industrial Revolution. And the fact is, the United States is the world's largest producer, but it's also been a leader in reducing emissions. So as Chief of Staff of the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, I was able to see firsthand the effects of overreach and overregulation by the government. So, the reality is global emissions would continue to increase even if the U.S. cut its emissions to zero. And so, in my opinion, Americans simply can't afford to bear all the burden of trying to slow climate change while other countries are getting a free ride on our effort. And in other countries around the world, particularly China and India, for example, they must be required to do their fair share. So I think the better way is responsibly growing the American economy and letting the free market solutions create more effective and economically sustainable solutions is much better solution and strangling U.S. industry base with needless regulation and forcing them to move offshore. So in Congress, I will definitely ensure that we eliminate or at least reduce unreasonable bureaucratic regulations and mandates and allow the private sector to do what it does best, create jobs.
Ken Abernathy, thank you. Andrew Bales, what about you and climate change?
In light of the recent pandemic, the coronavirus, the Chinese virus, as it's being called, because it came from China, they lied about it. One single thing that we could do to improve our economy or to improve our climate is to stop buying products from China. And I believe that wholeheartedly. China is one of the biggest polluters. I am not for the Green New Deal, not for carbon taxes or anything like that. I do have some interest in carbon capture technology that's being used by some of the coal manufacturers, and I'd like to see the clean coal technology because we're just not there yet with our technology to be able to move away from oil and to move away from coal. So there you go.
All right, Andrew Bales, thank you. Micah Beckwith, how do you plan to address climate change, or do you?
Yeah, I love the climate more than anybody. I think we can see God's creation better when we step outside into the clean air, see the clean water, and we should protect that. But I also don't buy into this theory that we got 12 years left, or else the world's gonna end. The Green New Deal is absolute, it's just stupid. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say that, and I'm not gonna destroy our economy just so we can make sure that we put in all these carbon taxes. And God gave us this planet to use it and to enjoy it, and we need to be good stewards of it, absolutely. But let's be wise in that. And for us to go out and say, hey, we want to limit air travel, I think that's just ridiculous. And like it's already been said, I don't want the United States to carry the burden when the rest of the world isn't doing anything. When China's pumping in more emissions than any other country, the United States shouldn't have to bear their burden. And these climate scientists in the 80s, remember, they were afraid that we were going into an ice age. They started pumping emissions into the atmosphere to warm up the atmosphere. And then in the 90s, it was global warming. And now they don't know what's going on, so they just call it climate change. So I think the science really isn't there. And I think that the ingenuity of the free market will improve it would improve our situation far better than the government ever could. So open up the free market, let us create sustainable technology and renewable energy, and that's the approach we got to take.
Micah Beckwith, thank you. Carl Brizzi, to you now.
Thank you, David. We live on this beautiful planet, and we absolutely have an obligation to care for it. But climate change is not the big, scary emergency that some would have you believe. AOC and Soros and this Green New Deal has nothing to do with the climate. It has everything to do with control. It has everything to do with controlling people, controlling behavior, controlling where you live. Right now, climate change is not the biggest problem facing us, right? The Chinese, who are dumping pollution into the environment, are it's the same rogue nation that gave us coronavirus. That is what we need to be dealing with. We are at war with this virus, and it is damaging, polluting our country, and that's the number one thing we need to deal with. We need to get back to work. We need to hold China accountable.
Carl Brizzi, thank you. Alan Davidson.
When people hear the phrase climate change, they usually think of greenhouse gases, but few people actually know what greenhouse gases are. The four most common greenhouse gases are water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Water vapor accounts for about 60% of the warming effect that greenhouse gases have on the climate. Humans and animals naturally produce carbon dioxide and methane, and oxides of nitrogen have been regulated as a pollutant in the US since the 1970s. Carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide can be reduced by burning fewer fossil fuels, but the reduction won't be enough in order to mitigate the climate change caused by an ever increasing human and animal population. I don't support taxing or regulating carbon dioxide directly, but I do believe we need to reduce our country's dependence on fossil fuel combustion. Doing so will reduce our country's dependence on imported coal and oil, reduce the threat of terrorism and our presence in the Middle East, and reduce carbon monoxide and dioxide and oxygen, oxides of nitrogen.
Alan, thank you that we're running low on time there. Thank you. Chuck Dietzen, your turn.
Well, once again, having visited several other countries that have these types of issues, being in Ecuador and in Nigeria, where I've seen how some transcontinental companies really destroy the land and the air as they are taking fossil fuels out from under different populations. I have to say, what I've seen in this country, I think we've done a very good job. And frankly, the Paris Accord wasn't asking China anything about their emissions until 2030. That population is 4 times the size of the population of the United States. So that's an important thing to look at, quantity. The other part is within this district, I think we can learn some valuable lessons on how to switch to more fuels that can be beneficial not only to the environment, but are reproducible, such as the biofuels at Poet in Korea, where they capture the CO2 and actually use that for other types of industry. And then also in the South Park Kokomo, where they've actually continental still area and turned that into a solar.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson.
I do believe we need to protect our environment for future generations. We need to leave the environment better than before. I'll support legislation that's based on science, facts, research, and the knowledge of credible experts. I'll base ongoing legislation on measurable results and not wasteful spending toward legislation based on pure emotion that has no basis or merit.
Beth Henderson, thank you very much. We have a final question now before we go to closing comments. And I ask that you do this in about 30 seconds or so, because this is a simple question and should be easy to answer. Do you support term limits? Kent Abernathy.
So the service to the public was never intended to be a career profession. Even George Washington realized that as the first president, that he, after 2 terms, stepped down. He probably could have served forever. I find it ironic that Congress has limited the president to 2 terms, and yet they place no term limits on themselves. So if, as a member of Congress, I will co-sponsor legislation to put in place term limits.
Kent, thank you. And Andrew Bales, again, about 30 seconds or so. Do you support term limits?
I do support term limits. I signed the term limit pledge with termlimits.com earlier this fall. I've talked to some people who are completely against it, and they think that it was never meant to be that way. Now, obviously, we would have to amend the Constitution to do so. And the question is, how much is too much? How many term limits? Should it be 2 terms, 3 terms? There's a fine line, I think, between experience. We don't want to leave Congress empty-handed with experience, but at the same time, it was never meant to be a lifelong career.
Andrew, thank you. Micah Beckwith, do you support term limits?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that 12 years, that'd be 6 terms for the House is what needs to happen. And I think 2 terms in the Senate, that's 12 years for senators as well, is incredibly needed right now. Career politicians, like it's already been said, was never designed by our founding fathers to be the case. Actually, in the House of Representatives, the reason it's 2 years is because it was designed to only be 1 term. Men would leave their farms, their businesses, their families. They would travel weeks on end to get to the Capitol, and they would serve for 2 years, come back, pass the torch to somebody else, and let them serve. It needs to go back to that. We've got to get this under control. Term limits, 100%.
Carl Brizzi, tell us about term limits.
Yes, of course. 100%. Support it. Sign the pledge. Like, what kind of a crazy individual would want to spend their entire life 30 years as a legislator, right, on Capitol Hill. That to me is a sickness. So no, absolutely. And if you don't do it for the people, at least do it for your own mental health.
Carl, thank you. Alan Davidson.
I'm a bit neutral on the subject. I really think that if we had term limits, what it would do in a lot of congressional districts, it would force out good, reliable Congress members, force them into the lobbying profession, where they would then come back and try to influence freshmen and sophomore level Congress members. I think that term limits would do more harm than good. I really do.
Alan, thank you. Chuck Dietzen, tell us what you think of. Go ahead.
Wholeheartedly support term limits. In fact, through this whole campaign, I've only run into one individual who disagreed. He's a state senator and said, I think some people need to stay and do the heavy lifting. If in fact people would go and just be a representative for 2 years and return, then that would make sense. We've had some conversations about should the term for in the House of Representatives maybe 4 years so that you're not constantly campaigning, but fully in favor of term.
Thank you, Chuck. Beth Henderson.
Yes, I wholeheartedly believe in term limits, and signed the term limits pledge as well. I look forward to joining Mike Braun, who endorsed me as a business person, outsider, to serve and do the right things, and then go back to your public life. 3 terms in the House and 2 terms in the Senate, and that's what I will stick with.
Beth Henderson, thank you. Well, we're approaching the end of the program. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for closing comments. Kent Abernathy.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity to connect with the citizens of the 5th District. You know, I'm reminded of a passage from West Point's Cadet Prayer. It says, make us choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. I'm running for Congress because I believe we need leaders in Washington who put the country first, who focus on providing solutions, and are willing to make the tough decisions to reclaim the life we knew. But I also think it's really critical for Republicans in the 5th District to choose a candidate who's best able to win what's going to be a very contested general election. I firmly believe that my experience, my record of success in business, in military, in state and federal government, have worked for both Governor Mitch Daniels and Governor Mike Pence, has positioned me as that candidate. So I ask for your vote. I ask for your support. Please visit my website. It's www.kenabernathy.com. Thanks.
Kent, thank you. Andrew Bales.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Indiana Town Halls, for putting on this wonderful forum tonight. I would like to say that there are so many issues in this country, and it takes real leadership. It's going to take someone who has a knowledge of many different aspects of life. Myself, I have been a teacher. I have been a factory worker. I have been a business owner, musician, an analyst for data. The list goes on because I seek out things that I'm interested in. In order to be successful in Congress, one must be a jack of all trades, master of many. I believe I'm that person. I'm asking for your vote on June 2nd. Thank you. Andrew
Bales, thank you. Micah Beckwith.
Well, thank you for having me again tonight, Indiana Town Halls. It was a great event. I am an influencer and I'm a fighter. Right now, we need people to win the influence of the next generation. Why is the Constitution one of the greatest documents ever written? Why are conservative values the best for our nation going forward? If we don't win this battle in the hearts and minds of the next generation, it's over. I can do that better than anybody else in this race, and that's why I'm running, to preserve those liberties for our children and our children's children. I'll defend the Constitution. We'll put America first. We will promote economic growth with unleashing the free market, getting rid of regulations, getting rid of taxation, overbearing regulations, overbearing taxation, and we will reduce the size and scope of this overbearing, overreaching federal government every single day in Washington. So thank you, and I appreciate your vote June 2nd.
Micah Beckwith, thank you. Carl Brizzi.
Thank you to WFYI, and thank you, David Barris, for hosting this event. It's been an honor to participate with you tonight. You've heard us talk about a pivotal moment in history that our country is facing with coronavirus, but that's not the reason why I got into this race. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-First Amendment. I got into this race to fight for those fundamental constitutional values that make this country great. But right now, we are plunged into a war with an invisible enemy, with a virus that we can't see, and the collateral damage from this virus is devastating our country. We must ensure that frontline workers get the help that they need. We must get back to work and start the economy, and we must hold the Chinese government accountable. As a batted tested prosecutor who has run twice in a purple district, which is what the 5th district is becoming, I track crossover votes. Democrats vote for Carl Brizzi. I will win. I will work with President Trump to hold China accountable. And as I stated in my opening, I'm running for Congress because our country is in peril. It's not because I need a job. It's not because of a vanity project. China lied about the virus, David, causing thousands of unnecessary deaths, costing this country trillions. And I'm the only person who is running who's investigated the Chinese government for attempting to influence U.S. elections and U.S. policy. I've done it before. When you send me to Congress, I will do it again. I humbly ask you for your vote. Thank you, and God bless America.
Carl, thank you. Alan Davidson.
I want to thank Les Zwern and John Ruckelshaus of Indiana Town Halls for their hard work arranging this online debate, and to you, David, for moderating, and to WFYI Productions for hosting. This debate has provided an excellent opportunity for interaction. This election is very important. Whoever wins it will have a very tough first term in office. I believe I'm the candidate most qualified to handle the job, with a history of improving government in my 27 years of public service to Hoosiers. I hope and pray this pandemic draws to an end very soon. Good night.
Alan, thank you. Chuck Dietzen.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for listening to all of us. I'm honored to be on here with all of these fine people. I believe I'm the best candidate because, as somebody described me once, they said, you're a communitarian. It is the way I live life. And frankly, I do believe that other people should have access to health care, and I've never been able to put myself before others. But I think I've always been able to work as a catalyst to bring people together to do something positive. The government is there to create guardrails and passing lanes. They are not the trucks. They are not the truck drivers. We are those people. We are those assets that make it happen. And I think that what we must do is make sure that we don't drift any further towards socialism, creating more of a dependency, which I've seen in some countries have had tyrannical leadership. Haiti. Please Google me, take a look at the website, and see that I have a track record of getting.
Chuck Dietzen, thank you. Beth Henderson.
For the past 18 years, the Gallup poll on ethics has shown that nursing is the #1 most trusted profession, and Congress is the least. There are currently only 2 nurses in Congress, and they're both Democrats. With your support, I can hardly wait to get to Congress to represent you, the people of the 5th District, with integrity and inspiration. I will use my unique skills and work ethic to start addressing these pressing challenges and getting things done. Working together, we can and will deliver a strong economy, a manageable healthcare system, and ensure opportunities for prosperity for ourselves, our children, and future generations of Hoosiers. Please go to my website, bethforindiana.com, for more information. I ask for your vote, and I thank you for your support. Thank you, and God bless you and your families during this most difficult time. Good night.
Beth Henderson, thank you. And thank you to all the candidates and the viewers, you. Thank you to all of our partners as well. Please stay tuned for a second 5th District Town Hall. That's coming up at 8 o'clock, give or take a little. There's a lot of technology involved in getting everybody together and making it all work, so it may be a minute or two after 8, depending on how things go between now and then. We will also conduct a town hall for your Democratic candidates. That'll be tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. For more on this project and the 5th District race, go to indianatownhalls.org. While there, please complete the survey developed by IU Northwest. The results will help Indiana Town Halls understand how to make future town halls better meet your expectations. The survey should take no more than 5 minutes to finish up. Your responses will be strictly confidential. Thank you, and again, we'll be back somewhere around 8 o'clock. Otherwise, good night.
This virtual town hall meeting is presented by Indiana Town Halls and WFYI Productions, with support from these partners.